All right. Today, live review of this one, Old Pulteney 12-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey from the Highlands, almost at the very top of the Highlands. It is one of the most northernmost Highland distilleries here. This is 40% ABV, 80 proof. It is chill filtered and does have color added. And it is 12 years of age, mostly in refill X bourbon, our favorite barrel, refill X bourbon, old tired refill bourbon. This is distilled in Wick, again at the very north of the Highlands. I think it's still. I don't know if there's a more northernmost distillery now or not, but of course, Cat is here. Hi, Cat. You don't want chicken? There's chicken over there. Uh-oh. Too late. You lost your chance at chicken. So again, we're going to rate this at a 100. 25 for aroma, 25 for palate, 25 for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my personal subjective opinion. And it's actually been a little while since I drank some of this, so it'll be an interesting reminder. Again, it's kind of an old-style distillery. A bit of a spiciness, minerality to the distillate, which is kind of interesting. Unfortunately, this particular representation is 40% alcohol and not terribly old, so it might not really be that robust of a presentation, but we'll kind of see what we have going for us, if the cat will allow it. Is this allowed? The problem with you is you're just going to get fur all over everything. Okay. I think we're going to put you down. Cat. Yeah, cat. Luck, the entire time we were playing Riven, she could have been up here, and then as soon as I got off of Riven, she came up. She came up to be the center of attention, as she is wont to do. All right. And of course, there's just random sheddings all over this bottle now. All right. Come on, you can pop better than that. Womp womp womp. We're not alcoholics in here? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right, so here's our again 12 years ex-bourbon refill. This is actually color added, despite the fact that it doesn't look very opaque. This is has E150 included. Now 12 years in an ex-bourbon barrel doesn't look like very much. It looks like barely yellow most of the time. So that's probably why this was colored a little bit to make it look like it's not like distillate. A lot of like 10 and 12-year-old refill bourbon whiskeys basically just look almost clear. So it kind of makes some amount of sense that they colored it somewhat. We would prefer that they did not do that, but you and I both know that some people judge based on appearance. Not that strong of an aroma initially. We're going to give this a couple minutes just to rest, though. But again, it is 40% alcohol, so it's not particularly robust, and we can't expect too much of it in that regard. So yeah, just initially off the aroma, there's like kind of like a coastal sea air, kind of salty kind of quality. You do get a light, kind of like breezy apple note. And there's a slight kind of almost spicy malt character. there is kind of another kind of spiciness to it that's almost like, it's hard to describe, but it does have a peculiar kind of like almost industrial spicy kind of note. You know, I actually like bourbon. Bourbon's not my favorite category either. I do drink some amount of bourbon just because it like kind of expands the you know, your range of experience and what you know, like train your palate to assess and accept. So this one in particular, again, this is a Highland single malt Scotch whiskey that was aged in ex-bourbon, refill ex-bourbon cask. So it's not going to have too much of that bourbon quality. It's going to be mostly distillate notes. Again, that's one of the benefits of like, and why we kind of like sometimes when Scotch is aged in refill ex-bourbon is because you might get a little bit of sweetness, you might get a little bit of like vanilla and maybe a slight spiciness, but what you mostly get is closer to the distillate related notes of the Scotch. So almost dropped my phone in the bathtub. I would not recommend, especially if it's full of water. It's kind of an interesting development, a little bit more bready now, a little bit more yeasty, kind of reminiscent of like a Glenfiddich. But it's still like that little bit of edge of spice. And again, a slight apple character. And there's a certain like salty minerality. I'm literally taking a bath. Yeah, probably don't drop it in there. Just a tip from me. Unless you want an excuse to get a new one. Sometimes you just need a good excuse. I think mine's almost 3 years old. I could take any excuse to buy a new one. But it works fine. I don't need a new one. Yet. Brand new? Oh, no. Not a good idea. All right, Old Pulteney, 12-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey on the palate. It's not sure. Mostly malt-related notes on the palate. There's a slight spiciness, a slight minerality to the palate. Despite it being pretty watery, it has a pretty reasonable mouth presence for me. Into the finish, you kind of get like that, again, that sort of salty, mineral, kind of like a spiciness. There's a little bit of malts on the finish with kind of like a soft oak presence. Again, those are refill ex-bourbon barrels, not too strong. Not really a whole lot of like barrel presence there. Don't really taste like the bourbon notes. That being said, of course, at 40% alcohol, it drinks fairly tame. It drinks fairly soft. It's not particularly challenging. The only challenging component I think on this for me is that the notes are like not quite like the sweet and approachable kind of like nice, pleasant notes. They're kind of a little bit interesting. They're kind of a little bit different. Again, you have some of that minerality, some of that saltiness, some of that spiciness, and it kind of like hits in kind of a slightly old school spirit, kind of like not quite like sweet and pleasant and all the nice things kind of way, in a little bit of a different kind of manner. So that you might find those particular attributes challenging, but in terms of like spikiness, spike of flavors, obviously like alcohol is at a minimum. It's not hot at all. It's easy to hold on the tongue. But these are all things that are generally true of 40% alcohol. So we're going to give this a couple little sips here, and then we'll start talking about some numbers. I like the flavor profile here, but at the end of the day, it is a 40% alcohol 12-year-old whiskey. So we kind of have to take that in stride. Maybe like a slight vanilla presence, but very low. And again, it's mostly malty with that kind of salty minerality, slight presence of apple, slight presence of vanilla. And of course, the flavor on the palate, pretty tame, pretty malty, slight spiciness, slight coastal quality. You do get a spike in flavor right on early finish, back palate early finish. That kind of like minerality note, that spiciness kind of spikes. And then you kind of ride into that like softer maltiness, softer barrel kind of characteristics on the finish. Finish is like, honestly, pretty reasonable. We'll say like medium length. Despite it being not terribly old. And honestly, the mouthfeel is not like super duper washed. Like sometimes with these bottles at 40% alcohol, it kind of feels really watery, and the flavor is not that intense. So there is some loss here in terms of the bottling dilution. But the actual like mouthfeel is not like watery, like super duper watery. It's got a little bit of robustness to it. So the texture is not completely suffering as a result of the dilution, but all this means to say is if this was like 46 or 50% alcohol, man, it would be a banger. It means to stand up to the water pretty well, but we still would like it if it was just a little bit more, you know, a little bit more robust. We don't like to pay for water. A little like kind of low sweetness is coming in. But mostly kind of what we already established. So we'll do one more and then we'll talk about numbers. Again, I like the profile. It's kind of a bit different, bit interesting. A bit on the old school kind of spicy side. That being said, very, very tame, very smooth, approachable, and well-rounded in these ways. Let's talk about the aroma out of 25. Again, kind of expected notes. You get a little bit of fruit from that distillate. Mostly malty. The barrel speaks in a little bit of vanilla, but not much. Again, slight spiciness, slight coastal notes. Pretty reasonable for 40%, but again, you know, the aroma is pretty robust against dilution. Usually you still get some pretty good aromas for some of these, despite them being 40% alcohol. Several notes, reasonable intensity. We'll go with 15. So the palate at 25. It's pretty tame, so we'll keep that in mind. Yeah, pretty light in the palate, mostly malty, slight spicy minerality. Kind of just it drinks like the proof. Very low in intensity, very tame. Probably like 13. Really picky about brown liquors. Typically don't even drink them. I like gin. Yeah, gin's not bad. Again, I don't know if you're the type of person who drinks gin deep, but I do gins from time to time. What do we have right now? We have Monkey 47. We have Sipsmith. We have the Botanist. There is on the community bottle vote on Discord. I know somebody voted for Hendrix, so we might do Hendrix next time. We did Monkey 47 last time. I'm definitely open to trying gins, but they're obviously like a little bit different. I do everything neat. I don't mix anything, so. I know Cap, if he's still here, if El Capitano's still here, he really enjoys gin as well. He's usually the guy who's trying to get me to try more gins. I would like to try more like tequilas as well, but that's forthcoming, I suppose. Tequilas and mezcals and that sort of thing, not necessarily barrel aged. There are some like unaged rums that are pretty interesting too, but most of the rums I think I have are all. I don't think I have any white rums. They're all aged rums. All right, so the finish at a 25. Again, good spike and spiciness, minerality, start of the finish, into that malty note, coasting into that oakiness. Probably the best part of this particular whiskey is the finish. Some good intensity. I don't hate 17. Finish is pretty good. Do like it. Tequila's probably my favorite, but you gotta be careful. Yeah, you know, I personally haven't had any tequila experiences, but I do know some people who have. That being said, I've never had tequila at this point. Never ever. I know a lot about, like, somewhat about how tequilas are made, and like the idea that some of them have additives and some of them do not have additives. And obviously there's a difference between like tequila and mezcal and what you would call an agave spirit. So I haven't really like gotten too much into them. I did put Patron Silver on the vote this month in case someone wanted to vote for it, but at this point it's hard for me to get a lot of good tequilas locally. I would have to order them from Alberta, and there isn't that much of selection even in Alberta. It's kind of limited. You probably guys have live in Texas. Yeah, you probably get like all kinds of different agave spirits that I don't even have close to have access to. So, you know, like I said, I can get Patron stuff. You know, I get a lot of the big brands. There are some like pretty like well-received brands that I can get sometimes, like El Tesoro, and stuff like that. But you have to be careful because a lot of the imported big brands of tequila I know do use additives. Like I think Jose Cuervo is like all additives, and Don Julio is all additives as well. So I don't know, like I'm not that picky about additives or not additives, but I do know a lot of people who are like really into agave. They say, man, you should just get the stuff that is pure, no additives and that sort of thing. So I think at the end of the day, we'll end up doing a little bit of both worlds, but I just haven't really gotten started with it yet because there's always so much like scotch and bourbon and rum that I want to like explore, and I personally has so much money. So every time I check out, I try to get something interesting, and it just hasn't been tequila yet. I can always find lots of bottles to waste money on. Additives are good. Where else am I supposed to get my vitamin C? Holy fuck. Alright, so out of 10, the texture, which actually seems pretty good. I expected it to maybe be a little bit watery, but let's see how I feel about it. There's a certain oiliness to it, kind of like that. It could use some more proof points, but it doesn't suffer tremendously. I'll give it a 4. I think it's fair. Gotta go to work. All right, you have a good time there. I'm sure it's a wild ride. I'll be off here pretty soon, so I'll see you tomorrow. If you're around tomorrow, same time, same place, same things usually. You have a great day. Thanks for being here. So at a 15, my personal subjective opinion with this one, the Old Pulteney 12-year-old Highland Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. And again, ultimately, yeah, it suffers from presentation, right? 40% alcohol, 80 proof. We would like 46, or whatever. We would like a little bit more in that world for the presentation. That being said, the distillate is a little bit unique. Again, there's a certain saltiness, a certain minerality that comes with this distillate, which is a little bit interesting. It's got a little bit of a spiciness to it, which doesn't come from like barrels. I think it's just innate in this distillate. It's a little bit spicy. And like that, it's kind of interesting, It's a little bit different than what you would get maybe from a different distillery. It's kind of like more in that kind of old school whiskey, a little bit more oily kind of Scotch. That being said, while it has some unique characteristics like that, its overall specs kind of drag it through the mud a little bit, unfortunately. So despite the fact that it is kind of sets itself apart from other like refill bourbon, kind of like 12-year-old aged single malts, it's gonna suffer just because it wasn't released at some higher specs that would have made it kind of like more robust than the way that they've given us this offering. So in that world, it's got some merits. But we just wanted more. We just wanted a little bit more oomph from this one. We'll give it a 6. I think it's fair. So if we go to the calculator, we got 15 and 13 and 17 and 4 and 6, and we call this 55. 55 out of 100. Good. It's good. It's good, not bad, especially for the price. Pretty reasonable price too. If we dig through our list to find other things that scored roughly 55, what would we see? We would see this is roughly the same score as Glenfiddich 12-year-old, same score as Glenmorangie 10-year-old, the original, same score as like Bushmills 10. This kind of like mid 50s area, slightly higher score than a Highland Park 12. So in that world, it did pretty well. It's in reasonable company. Other 40% kind of slightly distinct whiskeys all around that same score, So I think that's fair. That's a fair place to put it. It does some unique things. It's just needs a little bit more oomph, a little bit more just to make it special.